they found planted in the garden. And that is probably where they picked up dysentery. Those cabbages had probably been fertilized using human night soil. Dysentery is an infectious disease of the intestines, particularly of the colon. The symptoms appear a few hours up to 5 days after ingestion, and it's commonly caused by consuming human feces in water in some form, hence the link with the cabbages, we think. An untreated sufferer can produce as much as 10 to 20 litres of diarrhea a day, and the mortality rates are high, 50 to 60%. Deprive someone of food or drink for more than 5 days. And don't forget, by this time, the Scots had been suffering this for nearly 2 weeks. And the human body starts to conserve energy by reducing organ function and cellular activity. Moving on to Newcastle, we know that the dysentery was spreading fast. We have a graphic account here of the cost of cleaning St. Nicholas's Cathedral on the day after the men moved on to heading to Chester Street en route to Durham. The cost of cleaning St. Nicholas's Church was huge in terms of the time, over £350 in modern money. Here we have an image of Durham. The top painting is sometime in the 18th century, far later than our period. But if you look at the bottom picture taken a couple of years ago, you can see where I have marked out the square where the bodies were found. That is now the Palace Green Library Cafe. And here is the cathedral itself, with the nave, where anywhere up to 3,500 men were kept. The building was no longer in use as a church. Parliament had secularised it. Now it was just a big, handy open space, ideal for the purposes to which it was about to be put. The Scots, of course, had been here twice before, in 1644 and in 1640 as conquerors. There can't have been a warm welcome for them. There was probably still a fair amount of resentment for these men who'd occupied the city. And yet Hazelrig, we know, showed some spark of pity and was able to find local women who were willing to help to nurse the men who were so ill. Many of them were moved to better conditions in the castle. But the rest, at least 3,000, were simply dumped in the cathedral. With an interior space of 4,000 square metres, it was probably about the only structure big enough to house so many. By the standards of the time, we're looking at a number that equaled the size of a small or medium-sized town. Dysentery, now rife, was terribly contagious, and the men had no means of keeping warm. They made fires with whatever was available. We hear of church fittings being pulled down, particularly anything made of wood. And people amongst that population complained that they would wake up in the morning to find any piece of wood with them, stolen and used to light a fire by somebody else. We hear of crutches being taken, walking sticks. One man who had a prosthetic leg woke up to find that gone. If you look at this picture of the nave, you begin to get a sense of just how much crowded it must have been. This is a picture taken in the 1950s, I think. Nowhere near 3,000 people crammed in there. Attempts to feed the men may well have done more harm than good. This is another report from Hazelrig, again writing to the Council of State and to Cromwell, explaining what he's done to try and get some nutrition into the town. Unfortunately, what he's chosen, while it's well-intentioned, is probably about the worst thing that you could give somebody suffering from dysentery. Sudden feeding or rehydration triggers insulin production, which affects the production of electrolytes. They control the flow of water into and out of cells and spark the nerve functions that control things like breathing and heart function. It's particularly important that those electrolytes are replaced at a steady rate when you start feeding. If you've ever had to deal with a baby that's had diarrhea, you'll know that they're now given a liquid with salts and sugar in carefully judged amounts. Get it wrong, and you run the risk of flooding the body with fluids, causing cardiac arrest. That probably killed at least some of the men who died here in the cathedral.